It is the Doomsday Podcast, and it's special edition, first day of Cowboys training camp. And Ed, we'll get into it. I did find. I want to start out with this. I found it humorous, and Ed and I will be in camp the 6th through the 9th. Now, Ed, I think I only officially asked the 7th and 8th, so I hope when I show up at the 6th they don't block me. But who knows? Um, but August 6th, 7th, and 8th, Ed and I are planning on being in camp, and we're so thankful to Rogue Media Network, Corey, Mike, and the whole gang for making that happen. And so we'll be there. Ed, I thought, and it was I would say typical Jerry, but the truth is, man, I would say sometimes I listen to these things and I try to put myself, Ed, in the place instead of media, like what a fan must be hearing, and like to me, this would have been extremely frustrating because it was like, and part of it maybe he's been rushed or feels weird because he's been in this court case, but this more than ever was more of like he had some things he wanted to say, and he continued to stick to this all in thing. But Ed, in terms of like illustrating any sort of path forward, I would say overall this one was pretty short on substance. Is especially that first like 20 minutes of this thing.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about the beginning of the 2024 training camp and season, and it took, 20 minutes before the head coach, Mike McCarthy, was asked a single question. That's normal only with the Dallas Cowboys, and only maybe in the kind of offseason that they've had where they've been heavily criticized. In fact, I think you could argue that the only thing worse than the Cowboys' inglorious playoff loss to Green Bay in the first round last year has been their response to it. And the fact that they weren't active in free agency. They were the last team to sign a player. They brought back Mike Zimmer, which will make people think that they only know, one way to get things done, and that's going back to their past to recreate success. And they haven't gotten anything. They didn't extend Mike McCarthy, the head coach, going into last year of his contract. And bigger than that, they haven't secured long-term agreements with Dak Prescott or CeeDee Lamb. Lamb, of course, holding out of camp, and Micah Parsons, who's contract eligible for the first time. I thought they came across that was really where this press conference and the questioning was centered, in my opinion, was what's the justification for not getting any of those deals done? And I thought Jerry and Steven came off as very defensive about that whole issue. We'll hear what Jerry said about whether he believes this will be Prescott's final season as the Cowboys quarterback, because he is going out of contract in 2024 and they can't tag him and they can't trade him. And I thought it was interesting that while they talk so much about what a unique circumstance this is, that nobody else in the league has this problem. Nobody else has a quarterback at the top of the quarterback market and two other players in Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb who can justify being the highest paid non-quarterback in football. That's why they can't get anything done. Nobody else has this problem. They don't take any accountability for creating the problem, or at least for their role as a front office in terms of creating this problem by taking the approach that they have. I mean, they never franchise tagged a quarterback before. They franchise tagged Dak Prescott twice. And despite that, they then did a short-term 4-year contract, which included provisions that allowed him to control his fate. The no trade, no tag clauses. And so now they may have to pay Prescott to be the highest paid quarterback or player in all of football. And then the other two players eventually become, one surpassing the other, as the highest non-paid quarterbacks in football. And they did this because you're not supposed to have this problem in the NFL with all the things that the CBA gives ownership in terms of using the franchise tag as leverage against multiple players. Nobody else, except for Kirk Cousins, no other player has, at quarterback in his prime, has ever had the kind of leverage that Dak Prescott has been allowed to wield, and it's affected them in so many negative ways. They caved on holdouts by Zeke Elliott and Zach Martin. It's just been a colossal blunder by the front office to put them in this situation. And I think worst of all, Matt, is they're talking about what a great roster this is, and that's why they have this problem. They draft so well. They have so much talent. They've done nothing with it. They've got nothing to show for this incredibly talented roster they claim to have.
All right, Ed. My goodness. I mean, we may just end it right there. I mean, you brought the heat, and I like it. All right, but this is something. I mean, it's a tradition. It was always with Frito. Now it's with our man Mike at Rogue Media Network. Mike, please play the music. All right, Ed, and it is Doomsday Podcast. Ed and I'll be out there not long from now on August 6th. We will show up out there. And Ed, Jerry showed up with some notes. I don't know if that's a good thing. When he tries to stay on point, things honestly are more weird because he's not as willing to kind of go, almost. He's naturally more interesting. When somebody's provided him some talking points, he gets into this thing like hanging around the rim. I don't know if that was Tad who
We've
came
heard that
NBA.
before.
Yeah, and then this all in. Like I would say of all the phrases, ambiguity is just like, okay, we've heard that for years. But this, like, just because you decide that you're all in, it doesn't matter, like, if you say it over and over again, if your actions show otherwise, that's the only thing that people care about. So, like, Ed, at some point, Jerry, in this press conference, I think, tried to eliminate the media, right? He's like, we are a conduit for the fans, and we ask questions that people want to know and all those kinds of things. But he wanted to speak straight to the fans. And you kind of thought, well, maybe some sort of apology's coming. And really the only thing close to an apology was just kind of like, I'm trying as hard as I ever have. And he said something like, you've got me. And I would just say,
yeah.
I'm all in.
You got all of me. You got all of me.
You got all of me. And I would just say, like, that could not have calmed anybody's nerves. Like, did you hear one thing Jerry said today? And to your point from earlier, it was humorous that the PR chief had to say 20, 25 minutes in, hey, guys, we got practice coming up. Anybody got anything for Mike? Anybody want to ask Mike a question?
And then then the question was about his contract and the fact that he's coaching the final year of his deal, which almost never happens in the NFL. And he expressed when he arrived yesterday some discomfort about that fact, especially he's willing to bet on himself, which Dak has also said, being put in the same situation, but that many of the staff members are uncomfortable being in this situation. But yeah, I mean, Jerry tried to reassure everybody that this is an outstanding, team, that they have what Tad had to tell him, 14 Pro Bowlers, 12 All Pros. I did think it was interesting because there is this perception, and we see it all the time in social media and reaction to our shows and interacting with the public when we do things like the Travis Matthews show, that the Cowboys fans have given up on this team. They refuse to get excited and invest in this team emotionally in the way that they have, because they failed so frequently over the past 29 years, and spectacularly so 2 of the last 3 years in the postseason, by losing at home in games they never even led to the 49ers and Packers. And yet they countered that by saying, we've got the highest season ticket renewal rate that we've ever had. It leads the entire NFL, and it happened faster than has happened for any other team in football. So they're suggesting that people are all in and they buy into what this team is and this front office has done this offseason.
They're completely, it's like they're insulated, and almost more than ever, they come across as out of touch with the common fan. And even the part where Jerry started talking about, like, he's had a lot of things, and, believe it or not, that he can't afford in life. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear that. I've got a lot of things that, I can't afford. There was not much offered in the way of, man, I mean, their biggest substance was literally saying, look at how many Pro Bowlers we have. Look at how many, I mean, as you said, they're asking their PR guy, now how many we have? And he's like, 14, 12 all pros. And it's just like kind of a staged, like, don't you kind of feel like, even though he's willing to go along with it all, doesn't McCarthy have to be a little embarrassed, like, to be a part of that, sitting up there? Or do you think he's just learned to live with it?
I'm sure when this was originally, because of Jerry's court commitments and the paternity suit that kept him from, I guess, delayed his arrival by 24 hours and pushed this press conference back from yesterday to today. But originally they rescheduled it for Saturday. And today McCarthy, with the practice started, was going to handle it by himself. And then on Saturday it was going to be Jerry, Steven, and Will McClay. I'm sure McCarthy was thrilled with that he wasn't going to have to sit up there with Jerry and Steven, or so it seemed. And yet then things changed, and he finds himself in that very predicament once again. But yeah, I mean, the thing the comment Jerry made about not being able to afford certain things, that was interesting to me, in that it came as he was talking about Dak Prescott remaining the quarterback beyond this season. I thought it was the first time he suggested that, maybe I won't be able to afford my quarterback if he wants to be the highest paid player in football as much as I want him. When that time comes, I don't control that decision, and maybe I won't be able to keep him. But, this man owns the most valuable sports franchise in American history. He has a yacht. He has an estate. He has a helicopter. He has a private plane. It's been a long time since Jerry Jones couldn't afford something he wanted.
Yeah, I think that's right. And let's listen to what Ed was just talking about. This is Jerry Jones when he was asked about, do you envision a future possibly without Dak Prescott? And this was Jerry's answer about 20 minutes in, after a bunch of ambiguity that he talked about in the press conference.
John Michaud with The Athletic. Jerry, you mentioned about Dak potentially going to the final year of his contract, you being all in on this year, him being all in on this season. Has that allowed you to think how long you guys have worked together, you and Dak, that this could be his last season with the Cowboys?
I don't think so. Just to be very specific, I do not think that this will be his last year with the Cowboys at all. Am I being psychotic relative to my mirror? No. It's pretty clear, I think. I want to say it if it hadn't been clear, of how much we appreciate what Dak Prescott has meant to this team in a positive way. And the players do play better when he's out there. He does make his teammates play at a higher level. There's no question about it. So I'm right there in line with his best fan.
All right, and there he was, Jerry Jones, talking about Dak Prescott. And Ed, I mean, we've been here before. I mean, we spent a whole offseason or more, talking about, is Dak going to get his deal done? You remember the last time we went through this, and now it's like, yeah, we're going to get it done. But, it's like, it's the same thing with CD. Like, what more do you have to see? And there is some people believe that Jerry truly, even though he says he, doesn't envision him. And again, Ed, what can he say? I mean, like, he can't rightly say, yeah, I envision a scenario where we don't have Dak Prescott. He doesn't really want to jump on that.
That's why we traded for Trey Lance, so we have an alternative.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's just like, even if they end up in the same place again, let's say they lose in the first round, they're still going to have to make a decision like, okay, let's say he has really good numbers, puts up great numbers, and then they don't perform again. And do you think in his heart of hearts, Jerry has enough doubts? Obviously, they hate the scenario they're in with like three unique. They want to act like they've got the most unique situation ever in NFL history, right? But just to operate with Dak, I think Steven privately, he wouldn't say this publicly, I think there's a part of he and Jerry that truly want to get another look at Dak in the playoffs. But of course, you wait that long. And I guess, of course, if Dak ever advanced to an NFC title game, then they would love it, and they would have no problem paying for whatever. How do you think? How do you understand that they're looking at this, and how do you think this impacts Dak? Does Dak really care that he's going into the season in this situation?
We have to remember a couple of things to create the proper context for this. And the first of those things, to me, is they were in this situation last year in training camp talking about they were going to extend Dak Prescott. And it was be something that's, simply done, automatically done, and we wouldn't even know that it happened. And, there was an automatic provision in his contract this offseason that they could have invoked that would have lowered his cap number and allowed them to improve the roster, sign players to bring in and give Dak Prescott a better roster in this season that determines his fate if they don't sign him. And you remember at the end of last year, Jerry said something to the effect of, we've given him some of the best rosters I've had in my 30 years here, and it hasn't happened. So, like Troy Aikman said, I think it's natural to have doubts about somebody and what they're capable of when they've never done it. Dak's going to be 31 years old. He's going into his 9th NFL season. And there's never been a quarterback in NFL history who has started for the same team to begin his career 8 straight years without making the championship game and then taking that team to the championship game in his 9th year or later. Never happened. Now, what has happened with Drew Brees and John Elway, they didn't go, and Peyton Manning, they didn't go to their first Super Bowls until year 9 or later. So it's not unprecedented that a quarterback who's played 9 years as a starter hasn't been to a Super Bowl and then goes to one, because John Elway won one in his 15th year. Drew Brees won his first in his 9th year. So it can happen. But I think everything, despite what Jerry and Steven have said, I think they've shown that they have real doubts about Dak Prescott. And they're not sure he can deliver what they once thought he was capable of. He's had 3 great chances, in recent years. And it hasn't happened. They led the NFL in scoring. They're the only undefeated team in the league at home last year. Lost their first home game to the youngest team in football and a quarterback who's never been in a playoff game. Never even led the game. And Dak Prescott had a failure of nerve in the game. The defense was horrible. Only game all year where they didn't create a turnover or a sack. But Dak had 2 turnovers, including a pick 6, and was part of the reason they got behind 27-0. So, yeah, I think they have doubts. I think Jerry's nightmare scenario, and you kind of just alluded to it, was what if they don't sign Dak Prescott to an extension? The Cowboys go to the NFC Championship game or beyond for the first time in 29 years, and then Jerry doesn't have control over bringing Dak Prescott back. Wouldn't that be the ultimate irony?
Yeah. Although at that point, the enormous breakthrough that it would be, then Jerry knocks off all this poor me, and he just has to pay him just enormous, whatever it takes. And Dak would totally have him over the barrel. Jerry operates in this la-la land still, where it's like, well, these guys play for the Cowboys. How can we not get like a team-friendly deal? Why can't we get one of like those Mahomes deals? Well, first of all, Mahomes, when he signed that deal, had already won a Super Bowl. It doesn't even look like that great of a deal for him now. It's a great deal for Kansas City because it's a fixed cost. They know exactly what they have every year. And the Cowboys, year after year, are just in peril because of how they've managed this. And quite honestly, Ed, and we'll probably try to talk to Steven when we're out there August 6th through the 9th. But if you're going to say Steven is in charge of the cap and he's in charge of signing these guys, as Jerry likes to say, he deserves some of this blame too. What Steven wanted today was to remind everybody that we drafted these guys. Never mind that they wanted other people before Dak. I mean, they kind of lucked out on that. But they did draft them, and he wanted full credit for that. Boy, we drafted, and so this is a great opportunity. But here they sit. Ed, there's no – to go to CeeDee Lamb for a minute. Like, he's sitting like prettier than anybody because they want to point to the and Steven alluded to it. They want to point to these other teams and go, the Vikings could give all that money to Jefferson because they don't have to pay a quarterback. And what in the world would CD settle for less money? Other than like what happened in the NBA recently, Jalen Brunson, who decided to help his team sign other players. We know that's not going to happen. And so, Ed, what recourse do the Cowboys have? Like, why they're going to end up doing, let's say he stays and he holds out until a week before the game against the Browns. Isn't this going to play out exactly how the Zeke Elliott thing played out? Almost to a T, because you had Garrett, as you pointed out many times, saying, I need arguably our best player in the, you've given me one last chance to prove myself. I have to have this guy. Won't McCarthy be hollering the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the front office hasn't taken accountability for creating this situation. The longer you wait to pay quarterbacks, the more it costs. How many times do they have to learn that in just dealing with Dak Prescott? And I think that's ultimately, why Jerry has an issue with Dak Prescott and maybe isn't willing to commit more to him is, hey, you know what? I'm tired of losing contract negotiation after contract negotiation to this guy who wins more of those than he does playoff games. Why don't we go see what we have in Trey Lance? I mean, he was a third overall pick for a reason. Mike McCarthy, he's a quarterback guru. Why can't he make something out of this guy? I mean, why is he any different than Jordan Love? Jordan Love had great success with a young team when he finally got to play. This guy was picked similarly high, maybe even higher. And it's the same thing with CeeDee Lamb. The market is established. He's proven that he's one of the top receivers in football. 3 receivers this offseason have signed contract extensions for $30 million or more. He's not going to play for half that. He's not going to play on the 5th year of his deal, his rookie deal, for $17 million or $18 million, whatever it is. He's just not going to until he has to. And by then, like you said, how much has that created a problem for everybody else? He's been on the field for like 98% of the plays that Dak Prescott's played in the NFL. Dak Prescott's not proven to be a winning quarterback without CeeDee Lamb since the Cowboys drafted him. I just don't get why they haven't been more effective and more proactive in getting these deals done for guys that they know are their franchise cornerstone players and they're elite players at the most important positions in football. And they always get taken to the wire and then they overpay. Mm-hmm. They never should have been in this situation where they had to franchise tag Dak Prescott even once, let alone twice, and then give him a better deal than any other quarterback in football could have so that now he's got more leverage than anybody in the whole league. It's insane. And you mentioned talking to Stephen Jones when we're out there. This podcast might prevent that. Certainly it's not going to help. But I like to know why they've taken this tack. Why? Mm-hmm. They've deliberately made this decision.
What's the upside?
Why have you done this? For what philosophical reason? What do you have to gain by taking this approach? Now, they've basically blamed the coach and the players for this scenario where they've been unsuccessful in the postseason. Basically said, we've drafted great. We have one of the most talented rosters in football. Look at all these Pro Bowlers. Gave them to Mike McCarthy, a Super Bowl winning coach. Dak Prescott, one of the highest paid quarterbacks in football, and we get nothing for it. I get that. There is some truth in that. They have been failed by the players. That's fair. But they've contributed to the situation they're in right now.
Yeah, and so here they sprint into training camp, and we've been at these training camp, and honestly, listening to this today, Ed, I thought there might be a moment where I was like, man, I wish Ed and I were out there for the beginning of this thing. And the more I listened, the more I was like, I think we made the right call. I mean, I think we let this thing get going a little bit, see kind of what's going on, and then get out there and watch that practice with the Rams. That's going to be a lot of fun on August 8th, which happens to be my anniversary with my wife, Meredith. Now, by the way, Ed, I need you to sit up because you mentioned Travis Matthew, and I see the brand. There you are. And I certainly have one of my new Travis Matthew golf shirts on. So we both have the golf shirts on. And then I recently took a picture with a lot of Travis Matthew on it. So Danny and all our friends at Travis Matthew, we appreciate. We had a great episode there. So Ed, I did want to at least mention who we were, who our wardrobe was furnished by for this episode.
That's the reason I would have wore a suit and tie, but I don't have a suit and tie by Travis Matthew, so I wore the golf polo.
I can't really, if I had them on, I couldn't show it. But my next move is this new line of shoes they have, because the only thing I don't have are Travis Matthew shoes. And on my recent trip overseas, I took a picture that showed my shoes, and one of my buddies suggested I'd gotten my shoes at Chico's, which I think is a women's clothing. So again, he was just being a jerk, but they would not say that, right, if I had Travis Matthew on. Okay, Ed, let's also there's some stuff about Jerry, and Jerry, as only Jerry could, only this family could. This thing was moved to Saturday because of a court case he was involved in. The court case abruptly ended Monday in Texarkana. It's a paternity suit. It's embarrassing. But you know what? Jerry's life is just sort of out there for everybody. In fact, Netflix will have that. I bet Netflix won't have the paternity. Maybe they will, because Jerry has control of that. And the question had to be asked to start I think is like, well, Jerry, what about the paternity suit? And Jerry's like, I'm not going to talk about this. The one thing he said, Ed, was that like, what do you say? It made it awkward for my family, or it's been sensitive for my family. And you're like, yeah, I bet, I bet. But again, this probably has been known inside the family, I would think, for many years. It's just Jerry. But I just thought Jerry, I don't know. I didn't think he was on his game today. And I don't know if he was playing too much by the script. I'm curious what you thought.
Not enough.
Or not enough on the script. What struck you? And again, we'll hear Jerry talking about something here in a minute. But other than that, what else struck you about today's news conference? Anything else really grab your attention?
Just how uninvolved, Mike McCarthy was.
Yeah.
And nobody. I mean, we used to go to this thing every year, and Jerry used to be talking about Super Bowls, and now he's defending himself in all manner of how he put this team together and how they got themselves in the predicament they're in. And let's also say there's plenty of time for them to get a deal done. In fact, it's not unusual. I was gonna look up this list I have of quarterbacks who have signed deals, or major players who have signed significant deals at this time of year or later. And if you look at it, the last 5 years, some of the biggest guaranteed money contracts in the NFL have been signed after July 15th and before the first week of this season. Last year it was Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson in 2022, Josh Allen in 2021, Nick Bosa, Deshaun Watson in 2020, Jared Goff in 2019. So it's not impossible to think that the Cowboys, if they really want to get a deal done with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, will ultimately get that done before week 1. We just don't know. And the other thing, we talk all about the Cowboys' position here. We don't know what Dak truly thinks about the whole deal. Can't be happy about the way he's been treated this offseason or at any point in his career, really, by management. I mean, when he came in as a rookie and won 13 straight games in a season where he didn't even expect to dress for games because Tony Romo got hurt, he goes 13-3, and Jerry's wistfully talking about, wouldn't it be great if Tony Romo came back at the end of the season and led us to a Super Bowl win. I mean, talk about disrespect. And then he gets to the point where he has to get franchise tagged twice. He's denied his chance to get fair market value. You know, everybody else on the team is allowed that opportunity, but not him. And now he finds himself in this situation again, where he's not only not signed beyond this year and may be forced to play the final year of his contract, but he's being blamed, and maybe rightly so, for not doing enough with a talented roster. So now you have to do it with a less talented roster, and it's all your own fault.
Well, and boy, good point there, Ed, because what it leads to is this. It can't help, and I think Troy Aikman, when he was on with us, has spoken to something like this before. It can't help but, you know, it's like it makes the other players on the team kind of go, what's going on? Like, this is weird. Like, Jerry used to have moments. I can remember covering the team going back to like 2003, where Jerry, and maybe he went too far the other way, he would like think that a contract and paying somebody huge money could motivate them and be some sort of motivating factor or trampoline effect on the season. And I just think, you know, Dak is a really good leader, and say what you will about his playoffs performances, and it hasn't been very good. But his teammates seem to love him. He projects very well. He's a tremendous leader, and he's a top 10 quarterback in the league. But like the way Jerry continues to treat him sort of weakens him to a certain extent. And again, I don't think it's going to maybe impact his play, but boy, his standing with the team, and then they're all looking around like, well, when are they going to bring CD in here? It's just really sheds light. And then, of course, Micah will be the next one. So, back to your point, Ed, also, though, it's like they want today's news conference, at least for Steven, was about trying to explain. It's almost like a debate or something. Okay, what's our platform? And our platform is nobody else in the league, and you started with the podcast today with this, Ed, with some fire, which I really like. But the platform speech from Steven today was, we're dealing with something so unique that nobody else has to do. And the way he's spinning this is, it's because we were so great in our drafting. So we have done so well, we have created a really ridiculous situation for ourselves. But it's because we're so good. So, but Ed, no matter who the fans are, like, that falls on deaf ears with fans at this point. But he's going to try to roll that thing out there anyway. That was Steven's platform today.
I think it's going to be interesting to watch how they handle Trey Lance and how he responds to, you know, his first opportunity to win the backup job from Cooper Rush, and how whatever happens out there and whatever development takes place for him as a quarterback, how that's perceived by the front office, and how, you know, that might affect what they ultimately do with Dak. And like I said, maybe Dak's tired of the whole thing. Maybe after all this, he won't want to be here anymore. That's entirely possible. Maybe he'll want to go to a place where every interception isn't the end of the world, you know, on national television. But again, part of the reason for the skepticism and the doubt about him is that they haven't delivered in the postseason, and he's largely responsible for that. You know, just like Tony Romo was. I mean, and he hasn't shied away from that, really. He's talked all along about, the measurement of a quarterback's success here is Roger Staubach and Troy Aikman because they won multiple Super Bowls. But maybe he doesn't think that's possible or as likely here as it would be for him someplace else at this point.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, Tony, boy, he got mad at me one time for writing this, but it was right after Flacco won a Super Bowl and got, at the time, an enormous contract. And I said, Tony's going to get that deal, which he did, and without the Super Bowl, right? And so because of the way the Cowboys managed this, their last two quarterbacks, who, by the way, were just like Moses.
Gifts from God.
Yes. They one is an undrafted and one is a 4th round pick, and they both ended up putting up huge numbers and becoming all pro and like MVP type candidates. And yet no quarterbacks, I'm talking about Tony and Dak, no quarterbacks in the league have ever had this much leverage over an organization that have done less. Because when you break it down, how many playoff wins do they have between the two of them?
4.
Correct. Over how many combined seasons?
Romo was 10. Dak's going into his 9th year. So 18 seasons.
Okay. 18 seasons, 4 playoff wins, and think of another quarterback combo that had that way with their organization, that just kept making enormous, or think of one even. It's hard to do. To think of quarterbacks. I mean, for a long time, it was kind of Stafford in Detroit. But then, of course, he gets traded and he wins a Super Bowl. But it's hard to think of any quarterbacks that have been paid at the very top that have had less results
In the postseason.
Correct. Yeah.
Usually it's somebody who's won a Super Bowl or been statistically prolific, been to a championship game at least. I think Stafford's the best example.
Yeah.
And, you know, you talk about 2 different quarterbacks during this period of time. The common denominator in all this, as we all know, is Jerry as general manager. And Tim Calishaw asked him a very fair but pointed question about why it is the Cowboys continue to operate using this model that nobody else in the NFL employs, despite the lack of success they've had with it, that the owner is the general manager. And Jerry remains unequivocal about that. And I don't know if we're going to play the or not.
No, you were setting it up beautifully. Just keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So our good friend, we both worked with him, Tim Calishaw, asked Jerry Jones very directly at the end of the press conference today at Oxnard about the unique situation and the way the front office and the way this football team has created a situation where the owner is also and has all along been the general manager, and that while I don't know if we're using the question, we don't need to say all this, but you know, Mike McCarthy's job is on the line this year. Dak Prescott's job is on the line this year. The only people who are never at risk are named Jones, Jerry, and Steven. Why is that?
And here is Jerry's very satisfying answer.
Tim Calishaw, Dallas Morning News. Jerry, as far as you being all in, Mike's job is on the line. That's been discussed. The other coach's job is on the line. The general manager's job is not on the line. Steven's job is not on the line. 31 other organizations don't do it this way. The only thing that happens here is coaches get recycled and you've made 8 coaching hires. Why does this make sense for the Cowboys when nobody else does it this way?
I think the Cowboys have had 2 general managers, Tex Ram and me. 2 in the history. You look around the NFL, and I'll bet, I don't know, I really haven't studied this, but I'll bet you they've had 30. They've had as many general managers maybe sometimes as they've had coaches. Since the reality of it is, which was from the day that we walked through the door, that I knew that I was going to have to be responsible for any and everything that went on. So that if that is going to be the case, then I'm trying not to use somebody else's commenters this way. I'm only comfortable doing it that way. I can't delegate that. Now, what that implies is that this thing is a product of me sitting up there throwing darts. That's not the case. I like to think that the reason that I've enjoyed some success in my life is that I've had people like Mike and Stephen in my ear hard. Now, Stephen is my son, and then my children, we all work together. I heard a father's prayer one time that says, please don't let me be a bully. Because I can be, they will let me because they love me. And so that I lay up waking nights making sure that my ears are open and that I'm not too willfully strong. So believe you me, I listen and I get a lot of input. And when this guy to my right talks to me, you notice in a draft room who I'm sitting by? I'm sitting by Mike. When he talks to me, it's going in and it's not coming out. Now, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not slow. So I do listen to the people around me. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be sitting here, Tim. I wouldn't even be sitting here. You can't get here and get to be a part of this, just me. And so I've had lots of input. Jimmy Johnson gave me a lot of input. Okay? Did anybody else have to make the final decision? The decision. Do you punch the button or not? Not one time in history that I've been involved with this team. Now, if my butt has got my mind out someplace else and not on this, then you have to trust me that I know how to, since I'm not on top of the issue, trust it when Mike says, we're going to do it this way. Stephen says, we're going to do it this way. Trust me. That's the way it is, and it's been that way since we got the Dallas Cowboys. Whatever we are or whatever we're not, I think I saw where we've the sixth winningest team in the last 15 years in the NFL or something like that, in the NFL. And with Mike as our coach, we've had, in my mind, we've had really good among 32 teams about what we've done. Does anybody think that good for me is folding it up and not having gotten to a Super Bowl? No. And I hope you all know me enough to know that if you could write a check and I had it and it had actually guaranteed me, whatever it is, you got you a Super Bowl. I hope y'all know I'd write that check. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I would. There's no such thing. And you have the greatest people, greatest coaches, greatest advisors you've ever seen, and it doesn't guarantee you a Super Bowl. Now, I apologize for this self-talk with you here today. But I do and have. This is not your normal GM situation. I mean to tell you, I will change on a dime if Stephen reaches over and says, let me tell you this, I'm going strong here. Or Mike goes strong. Will go strong.
All right, so there you have Jerry's explanation. And I want to add one piece of context, and this can be the last thing I have to say on this particular podcast. The Cowboys are one of 5 teams that haven't made the conference championship games since 1996. The Texans, Browns, Dolphins, and Commanders. Dallas is the only one of those teams that's had the same general manager the entire span of time. The other 4 teams have had 26 combined general managers, and all of those franchises have had at least 5 different general managers. The Cowboys have had Jerry, and will have Jerry.
I like how he blames it on like Clint and that whole group. Like it's, hey, Tex Schramm did it for, however many 29 seasons or whatever. So why can't I do the same thing? It's I didn't know what he was just all over the map today and didn't. And again, and Ed, I would just say this. I mean, there weren't a lot of like, hey, what about this play? And over the course of time, by the time we get out there, they'll be talking about position battles and who's emerged. I would just say, one of the frustrating things about this team right now is coming off horrible loss, arguably top 3 worst losses in the organization's history. I mean, you could make that argument, and yet they do very little. Like Mike Zimmer. Hey, you recognize that linebacker? You can have him. Okay. So they really didn't bring that much to the table. So like, I would just say, Ed, and this is going to be the last point I'll bring up, but like, there's no real point of this team. They don't have CD right now. They had a step forward at tight end last year. They lost their running back. They have Zeke back. So I don't think they've improved at running back. There's no part of the defense. It'll be nice to have Diggs back. He starts on the PUP list. Like, I think you have a hard time pointing at any aspect of the team and making an argument they're better there.
Well,
maybe linebacker.
Rookie
maybe.
offensive lineman.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
He might be playing center, and Guyton might be the left tackle, and both of them are trying to make position changes as rookies and potentially rookie starters. So that says something about how shaky that potentially could be.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is a boom or bust team or just a bust team right now. You know, it's like the boom or bust part of it means, to me, could they win 12 games again? I mean, history says yes. They have a lot of the same players back. But the other side of that, Ed, is Eagles, Giants, even Washington with its new coach and a couple of things they've added. Everybody else did make some improvements. And so I don't think you can just go bad division. Not a great division, but I think those two teams are either level or the Eagles are a little bit above. And that's how I see it. Ed, man, thank you. I mean, I just feel like we were in California. I mean, especially people don't even know this, but you've used several devices to record today's podcast. You've shown your versatility. Well, we appreciate the folks at Rogue Media Network. And of course, Ed, they will be sending us out to Oxnard, California. Ed and I will leave early the morning of the 6th. Certainly not my choice. I like to leave as late as possible. But for various reasons, one in particular, we decided to leave early.
Based on my recent experiences, the airline might send you out later than you expect.
And as only Ed and I, at one point, were booked on the same flight, we have now ended up on different airlines and different flights. And I think that's really the way Ed prefers it. Ed, great job. And thanks to Jill for her helping out this podcast as well, your lovely wife. And a happy birthday as we record this today, right down the hall from where I'm recording it, my 17-year-old daughter. She turned 17, Parker, who has been out to training camp, Ed, with us before, and you've kind of watched her grow up over the years. So that's an exciting day. So, Ed, if you'll wish her a happy birthday, please.
Happy birthday, Parker, and thanks for letting your dad do a hour-long podcast between celebrations.
All right. That is the Doomsday podcast after the Cowboys State of the Union, a special podcast. Look for more podcasts coming soon. We'll start rolling those out August 6th as we take our trip to Oxnard, California to be with the Cowboys. It is the Doomsday podcast. For Ed Werder, I'm Matt Mosley. Good night, everybody.
We are Rogue Media Sports.